Alchemy by Pauline Kael, published in The New Yorker, March 18, 1972. If ever there was a great example of how the best popular movies come out of a merger of commerce and art, The Godfather is it. The movie starts from a trash novel that is generally considered gripping and compulsively readable, though maybe because movies more than satisfy my appetite for trash, I found it unreadable. You're told who and what the characters are in a few pungent, punchy sentences, and that's all they are. You're briefed on their backgrounds and sex lives in a flashy anecdote or two, and the author moves on from nugget to nugget. Mario Puzo has a reputation as a good writer, so his potboiler was treated as if it were special, and not in the Irving Wallace Harold Robbins class, to which, by its itch and hype and juicy Romana Clef treatment, it plainly belongs. What would this school of fiction do without Porfirio Rubirosa, Judy Garland, James Aubrey, Howard Hughes, and Frank Sinatra? The novel The Godfather, financed by Paramount during its writing, features a Sinatra stereotype, and sex and slaughter, and little gobbets of trouble and heartbreak. It's gripping, maybe, in the same sense that Spiro Agnew's speeches were a few years back. Francis Ford Coppola, who directed the film and wrote the script with Puzo, has stayed very close to the book's greased lightning sensationalism, and yet has made a movie with the spaciousness and strength that popular novels such as Dickens used to have. With the slop and sex reduced and the whoremongering Guess Who material minimized, Nino, who sings with a highball in his hand, has been weeded out. The movie bears little relationship to other adaptations of books of this kind, such as The Carpetbaggers and The Adventurers. Puzo provided what Coppola needed, a storyteller's outpouring of incidents and details to choose from, the folklore behind the headlines, heat and immediacy, the richly familiar. And Puzo's shameless turn-on probably left Coppola looser than if he had been dealing with a better book. He could not have been cramped by worries about how best to convey its style. Puzo, who admits he was out to make money, wrote "below my gifts," as he puts it, and one must agree. Coppola uses his gifts to reverse the process, to give the public the best a movie maker can do with this very raw material. Coppola, a young director who has never had a big hit, may have done the movie for money, as he claims, in order to make the pictures he really wants to make, he says. But this picture was made at peak capacity. He has salvaged Puzo's energy and lent the narrative dignity. Given the circumstances and the rush to complete the film and bring it to market, Coppola has not only done his best, but pushed himself farther than he may realize. The movie is on the heroic scale of earlier pictures on broad themes, such as On the Waterfront, From Here to Eternity, and The Nun's Story. It offers a wide, startlingly vivid view of a mafia dynasty. The abundance is from the book. The quality of feeling is Coppola's. The beginning is set late in the summer of 1945. The film's roots, however, are in the gangster films of the early 30s. The plot is still about rival gangs murdering each other, but now we see the system of patronage and terror, in which killing is a way of dealing with the competition. We see how the racketeering tribes encroach on each other, and why this form of illegal business inevitably erupts in violence. We see the ethnic subculture, based on a split between the men's conception of their responsibilities, all that they keep dark, and the sunny false Eden in which they try to shelter the women and children. The 30s films indicated some of this, but The Godfather gets into it at the primary level. The willingness to be basic, and the attempt to understand the basic, to look at it without the usual preconceptions, are what give this picture its epic strength. The visual scheme is based on the most obvious life-and-death contrasts. The men meet and conduct their business in deep-toned, shuttered rooms, lighted by lamps even in the daytime, and the story moves back and forth between this hidden nocturnal world and the sunshine that they share with the women and children. The tension is in the meetings and the underworld darkness. One gets the sense that this secret life has its own poetry of fear, more real to the men, and perhaps to the excluded women also, than the sunlit world outside. The dark and light contrast is so operatic and so openly symbolic that it perfectly expresses the basic nature of the material. The contrast is integral to the Catholic background of the characters. Innocence versus knowledge. Knowledge in this sense being the same as guilt. It works as a visual style because the Goya-esque shadings of dark brown into black in the interiors suggest, no matter how irrationally, an earlier period of history, while the sunny, soft-edge garden scenes have their own calendar-pretty pastness. Nino Rota's score uses old popular songs to cue the varying moods, and at one climactic point swells in a crescendo that is both Italian opera and pure 40s movie music. There are rash, foolish acts in the movie, but no acts of individual bravery. The killing, connived at in the darkness, is the secret horror, and it surfaces in one bloody outburst after another. It surfaces so often that after a while it doesn't surprise us, and the recognition that the killing is an integral part of business policy takes us a long way from the fantasy outlaws of old movies. These gangsters don't satisfy our adventurous fantasies of disobeying the law. They're not defiant, they're furtive and submissive. They are required to be more obedient than we are. They live by taking orders. There is no one on the screen we can identify with, unless we take a fancy to the pearly teeth of one shark in a pool of sharks. Even when the plot strands go slack about 2/3 of the way through, and the passage of a few years leaves us in doubt whether certain actions have been concluded or postponed, the picture doesn't become soft-headed. The direction is tenaciously intelligent. Coppola holds on and pulls it all together. The trash novel is there underneath, but he attempts to draw the patterns out of the particulars. It's amazing how encompassing the view seems to be. What a sense you get of a broad historical perspective, considering that the span is only from 1945 to the mid-50s, at which time the Corleone family, already forced by competitive pressures into dealing in narcotics, is moving its base of operations to Las Vegas. The enormous cast is headed by Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone, the Godfather of a powerful Sicilian-American clan, with James Caan as his hothead son, Sonny, and Al Pacino as the thoughtful, educated son, Michael. Is Brando marvelous? Yes, he is, but then he often is. He was marvelous a few years ago in Reflections in a Golden Eye, and he's shockingly effective as a working-class sadist in a current film, The Nightcomers, though the film itself isn't worth seeing. The role of Don Vito, a patriarch in his early 60s, allows him to release more of the gentleness that was so seductive and unsettling in his braggart roles. Don Vito could be played as a magnificent old warrior, a noble killer, a handsome bull patriarch. But Brando manages to de-banalize him. It's typical of Brando's daring that he doesn't capitalize on his broken prow profile and the massive sculptural head that has become the head of Rodin's Balzac. He doesn't play for statuesque nobility. The light, cracked voice comes out of a twisted mouth and clenched teeth. He has the battered face of a devious, combative old man, and a pugnacious thrust to his jaw. The rasp in his voice is particularly effective after Don Vito has been wounded. One almost feels that the bullets cracked it, and wishes it hadn't been cracked before. Brando interiorizes Don Vito's power, makes him less physically threatening and deeper, hidden within himself. Brando's acting has mellowed in recent years. It is less immediately exciting than it used to be, because there's not the sudden, violent discharge of emotion. His effects are subtler, less showy, and he gives himself over to the material. He appears to have worked his way beyond the self-parody that was turning him into a comic, and that sometimes left the other performers dangling and laid bare the script. He has not acquired the polish of most famous actors, just the opposite. Less mannered as he grows older, he seems to draw directly from life and from himself. His Don is a primitive, sacred monster, and the more powerful because he suggests not the strapping, sacred monsters of movies like Anthony Quinn, but actual ones. Those old men who carry never-ending grudges and ancient hatreds inside a frail frame. Those monsters who remember minute details of old business deals when they can no longer tie their shoelaces. No one has aged better on camera than Brando. He gradually takes Don Vito to the close of his life, when he moves into the sunshine world, a sleepy monster, near to innocence again. The character is all echoes and shadings and no noise. His strength is in that armor of quiet. Brando has lent Don Vito some of his own mysterious courtly reserve. The character is not explained. We simply assent to him, and believe that, yes, he could become a king of the underworld. Brando doesn't dominate the movie, yet he gives the story the legendary presence needed to raise it above gang warfare, to archetypal tribal warfare. Brando isn't the whole show. James Caan is very fine, and so are Robert Duvall and many others in lesser roles. Don Vito's sons suggest different aspects of Brando. Caan's Sonny looks like the muscular young Brando, but without the redeeming intuitiveness, while as the heir, Michael, Al Pacino comes to resemble him in manner and voice. Pacino creates a quiet, ominous space around himself. His performance, which is marvelous too, big yet without ostentation, complements Brando's. Like Brando in this film, Pacino is simple. You don't catch him acting, yet he manages to change from a small, fresh-faced, darkly handsome college boy into an underworld lord, becoming more intense, smaller, and more isolated at every step. Coppola doesn't stress the father and son links. They are simply there for us to notice when we will. Michael becomes like his father mostly from the inside, but we also get to see how his father's face was formed. Michael's mouth gets crooked and his cheeks jowly like his father's after his jaw has been smashed. Pacino has an unusual gift for conveying the divided spirit of a man whose calculations often go against his inclinations. When Michael, warned that at a certain point he must come out shooting, delays, and we are left to sense his mixed feelings. As his calculations will always win out, we can see that he will never be at peace. The director levels with almost everybody in the movie. The women's complicity in their husbands' activities is kept ambiguous, but it's naggingly there. You can't quite ignore it. And Coppola doesn't make the subsidiary characters lovable. We look at Clemenza, played by Richard Castellano, as objectively when he is cooking spaghetti as we do when he is garroting a former associate. Many of the actors and the incidents carry the resonances of earlier gangster pictures, so that we almost unconsciously place them in the prehistory of this movie. Castellano, with his resemblance to Al Capone and Edward G. Robinson, plus a vagrant streak of Oscar Levant, belongs in this atmosphere. So does Richard Conte as Barzini, who appeared in many of the predecessors of this movie, including House of Strangers, although perhaps Al Lettieri as Solozzo acts too much like a B-picture hood. And perhaps the director goes off-key when Sonny is blasted and blood splattered at a toll booth. The effect is too garish. The people dress in character and live in character, with just the gewgaws that seem right for them. The period detail is there, a satin pillow, a modernistic apartment house lobby, a child's pasted-together greeting to Grandpa. But Coppola doesn't turn the viewer into a guided tourist told what to see, nor does he go in for a lot of close-ups, which are the simplest tool for fixing a director's attitude. Diane Keaton, who plays Michael's girlfriend, is seen casually. Her attractiveness isn't labored. The only character who is held in the frame for us to see exactly as the character looking at her sees her is Apollonia, played by Simonetta Stefanelli, whom Michael falls in love with in Sicily. She is fixed by the camera as a ripe erotic image, because that is what she means to him, and Coppola, not having wasted his resources, can do it in a few frames. In general, he tries not to fix the images. In Sunday, Bloody Sunday, John Schlesinger showed a messy, knocked-over ashtray being picked up in close-up, so that there was nothing to perceive in the shot but the significance of the messiness. Coppola, I think, would have kept the camera on the room in which the woman bent over to retrieve the ashtray, and the messiness would have been just one element among many to be observed. Perhaps the curve of her body could have told us much more than the actual picking up motion. The Godfather keeps so much in front of us all the time that we're never bored, though the picture runs just 2 minutes short of 3 hours. We keep taking things in. This is a heritage from Jean Renoir, this uncoercive, open approach to the movie frame. Like Renoir, Coppola lets the spectator roam around in the images, lets a movie breathe, and this is extremely difficult in a period film, in which every detail must be carefully planted. But the details never look planted. You're a few minutes into the movie before you're fully conscious that it's set in the past. When one considers the different rates at which people read, it's miraculous that films can ever solve the problem of a pace at which audiences can read a film together. A hack director solves the problem of pacing by making only a few points and making those so emphatically that the audience can hardly help getting them. This is why many of the movies from the studio system days are unspeakably insulting. The tendency of a clever, careless director is to go too fast, assuming that he's made everything clear when he hasn't, and leaving the audience behind. When a film has as much novelistic detail as this one, the problem might seem to be almost insuperable. Yet, full as it is, The Godfather goes by evenly, so we don't feel rushed or restless either. There's classic grandeur to the narrative flow. But Coppola's attitudes are specifically modern, more so than in many films with a more jagged surface. Renoir's openness is an expression of an almost pagan love of people and landscape. His style is an embrace. Coppola's openness is a reflection of an exploratory sense of complexity. He doesn't feel the need to comment on what he shows us, and he doesn't want to reduce the meanings in a shot by pushing us this way or that. The assumption behind this film is that complexity will engage the audience. These gangsters like their lifestyle, while we, seeing it from the outside, are appalled. If the movie gangster once did represent, as Robert Warshaw suggested in the late 40s, what we want to be and what we are afraid we may become, if he expressed that part of the American psyche which rejects the qualities and the demands of modern life, which rejects Americanism itself, that was the attitude of another era. In The Godfather, we see organized crime as an obscene symbolic extension of free enterprise and government policy, an extension of the worst in America, its feudal restlessness. Organized crime is not a rejection of Americanism, it's what we fear Americanism to be. It's our nightmare of the American system. When Americanism was a form of cheerful, bland, official optimism, the gangster used to be destroyed at the end of the movie, and our feelings resolved. Now the mood of the whole country has darkened, guiltily. Nothing is resolved at the end of The Godfather, because the family business goes on. Terry Malloy didn't clean up the docks at the end of On the Waterfront. That was a lie. The Godfather is popular melodrama, but it expresses a new tragic realism. Thank you for listening.